Hi, my name is Jay Clark. I'm a senior AI and ML solutions architect with AWS. In this video, I'm going to take you through a few of the more advanced import and export options available with SageMaker Data Wrangler. In this tutorial, I'll quickly run you through importing and concatenating multiple datasets, setting multiple data destinations, and exporting data to SageMaker FeatureStore. The example dataset I'm using for this tutorial is available on Kaggle. It's the Berkeley Packet Filter Extended Tracking Honeypot dataset, so BEF. This contains over 8 million records collected across 23 honeypots on a major cloud provider. So more than enough for this example. I've downloaded this dataset and have uploaded it to S3. That's where we're going to be loading our data from. The one thing that's worth mentioning is that they have already separated this into training, testing, and validation. I won't be using that, and for demonstrative purposes, I'll be using the raw or slightly less processed labeled data sets. So I've downloaded this. I'm going to hop over to the console and show you how I've uploaded this into S3. For this, I'm using my SageMaker default bucket. And in my multiple CSVs folder, I now have two folders. So first is the Beth dataset. And here I have some of that label data. I'll just cut this off so you can see this easier. So I have some of the label data. I also have a subfolder that I've put the Ubuntu collection in as well. And in this additional Beth dataset, I have another labeled CSV. So what we're going to do is I'm going to load in this folder first as a single data source, and then we'll add this additional data source and then concatenate the two. So next we can hop into SageMaker. Now enter my domain, and I will launch Studio. Okay, now that we're in Studio, well, first you notice there's a Beth dataset processing multiple flow file, just me making sure everything would work. But we're going to create a new file. So we can go up to File, New, and Data Wrangler Flow. And we're going to import some data. And take us to the screen, and we're pulling that data from S3. And now what we're going to do is go to our multiple CSVs folder, and we'll click Beth Dataset because we want to load everything in this folder. And we want to import nested directories as well. We come over to our right side. We can give this a name, but that's fine the way it is. And then, as always, I like stratified sampling, although I'll sample a few less. And for this example, my column is the sus column. So that we can import. This will take a few seconds. And while we're waiting, I'll just rename this. Okay, great. And let's close that off. So it's loaded in everything we had in that folder. We can go back and look at the source. The source files are here if you'd like to look at them. In general, it will give you histograms or bar plots depending on what the style of the data is. I don't find these super helpful, and they take a bit of compute, so I generally turn them off. But you are free to keep them on or not. You just want to check that we have everything here. So we have a timestamp column, a process ID column, some more stuff. Everything looks mostly fine. Uh, yeah, so this looks good. I don't think we really need to change any of these types. Although for the process ID and and all of the ID columns, it categorize those as longs or integers. They're not. They should probably be categorical, and so that should be a string. I don't really care about that for this example, but look at our data flow. We've now imported this data set, and we have those data set types inferred. Now, let's say we also want to import that other folder, the secondary data source that we have. We can click on import here and go back to S3. And we'll go to that same location, except we're going to click the additional data source. And there's only one in here, so you can click it directly if you'd like, or just load in the folder. But we'll load this in. This is also comment limited. We will also do stratified sampling. And we would do that by the sus column as well. Okay, and we'll import that. And it'll go through the same process it did before, which will take fewer seconds because there's only one file here. And now we'll still make sure we have everything that we need. Looks like we do. And when we go back out to our data flow, we'll now have two data sources. And you can do this for as many data sources as you have. Now, in this case, because they're the same, we're going to concatenate them. But if you had sort of an alternate data source that was linked by an ID, you could then join those sources as well. And so what we'll do, and so you could do, any amount of processing you'd like before concatenating these if you needed to do any pre-processing. But really, I just want to join these two things together. So if we click the plus here, you have these two options for your data sources. You can join them, which would be if you had an ID that linked these two, or we can concatenate, which is really just stacking them by rows. And so we'll concatenate this. Oops. We just click on what we're concatenating, and you'll see this will show up on your left-hand side. The sort of left data set in this case is the Beth data set, and then our right data set is that labeled, that additional Beth data set we used. You can click configure, and there are some additional options that you have. Really, you can add a column that indicates the source. So this would really be useful if you really want to keep track that this came from a certain date maybe, or a certain collection, and this came from another. I don't really need these, and I don't really need to remove duplicates here because we'll remove them later, but we can even preview. Which will take a few seconds. There we go. And so it's concatenated those things. Now we have a bigger data set, and we can add that. Validation is complete, no errors, great. And now we have a concatenated data set that we can use. And so we will perform our transformations on this concatenated data set. And you can do this for multiple data sources. As I said, you can get some really complicated flow diagrams going here where you join two data sources, merge another, concatenate another data source, and some really fun operations. But with that, I'm now going to perform some processing on this data set. That's not important for this video, so I'll probably cut it out. But just know in the paper that details this data set, that's also linked here. In the appendix, they give some recommended processing of those columns, and that's what I'll be performing here. So I'll pause this recording for a second. We'll come back. There'll be a bunch of transformation steps, but just know I was just following these steps, and they're not super important for this video. And we're back. So where we left off, we had loaded in our data sources, we had concatenated them, and then we were going to perform some light processing. I've done that, some data quality analysis, along with some column dropping, processing, transformations, and then finally dropping duplicates. So we have our entire flow here, and now it's time to export or finalize and then export this dataset. For this, if we'll remember, the authors provided a training, test, and validation split for their data. We want to offer the same, and for that we want to split our data, and we can do that within Data Wrangler. So we'll add a transform, and we'll add a step, and that step will be split data. And when this starts, it gives you the option of how you want to split. So you can do a randomized split, an ordered split, a stratified split. I'll go with stratified because that's my favorite way to split in general. And then it gives you options for giving these names along with the split percentage. It also lets you add splits, and we will do that because we also want a validation split. And then finally, we just need to choose that split percentage. I'll choose 10 and 10 for the test and validation, and keep it at 80 for the training. And finally, we just need to select that column that we're splitting on, a stratified splitting by, which will be the sus column. You can enter in a random seed. I generally would just enter in the current year, your choice, and we can preview that. And once this is done, it'll give us the preview, which will be of however many splits we've created, made of our data set. And you can look through them and just ensure that everything's there that you want with that sample. And that should complete in a few more seconds. Okay, there we go. And at the top, it shows you right now, we're looking at the train dataset view. We also have the test and then the validation. This all, these are fine for me, so we'll just add them. And what happens is now you have the stratified split, and you have three new data sets, or three data sets. And the first is the train, the test, and then the validation. And we're going to save these in different locations. So for this example, because we're going to be using the training data fairly often, we're going to save this into SageMaker FeatureStore, and I'll go through the steps of preparing the data for that. And for the testing and then validation, we'll just save those to S3. So I've gone to S3 and I've just created two folders that are going to hold my output. So a testing data output, a validation data output. And you can do the same wherever you're planning to store this. And so now these have been created and validated. And so we have these three data sets that we can do further processing on or just export. And when we're exporting multiple data sets, what we want to do is just set their destinations. So in this case, we have the test data set, and we're going to add a destination, and that's going to be to S3. And we can choose a name, choose Beth test data as this CSV. All of this is fine, and then we just need to add our location. And for that, we have the same Explorer-like interface, and we'll just store it in testing data. Okay. You can choose a number of partitions and a column to partition by. We'll just leave those as default for us. And now we have a destination. And so when we run our processing job, which I'll also show in this video, that will then do all of the processing, do the splitting, and then this data set will go to this folder in S3. We'll do the same thing with the validation data. We'll also send that to S3. think I capitalized that. CSV. And we will choose its location as well. Validation data. And add that destination. So now we've added these destinations. We want to add a destination here for this data set. And for that, we want to use SageMaker FeatureStore. And I like to think of SageMaker FeatureStore as just a database for your process datasets. You see, I've got some feature groups here. We need to create a feature group if we're going to store this. I'll take you through creating a new one. So there are two columns that we'll need to make sure we have, and we won't have them, so I'll add them and show you how to do that. But we need a record ID, which is really your ID column, and if you're thinking of database, and you need an event time, and this event time is going to keep track of sort of when this feature was created. So it gives you the option of having it create an event time. I am going to use that for the record ID, so I'll create it myself. And if we go to next, it then gives us a schema. And this schema just lists what each feature type is. Right, so our process ID is integral type. Our process name is a string type. We don't have a fractional type, but that is another type as well. And just gives the name and the type. And this is what we need to pass to our feature group to ensure that it knows what data we're giving to it. And so we'll copy that when we're done, but right now I need to go back because I need two columns. I need a record ID column and a event time column. They can be named whatever you'd like. Just know that the event time column needs to either be fractional or string. And so I will add a transform. And this will be a custom transform. And I'll call this FeatureStore transformation. And for this, I'm just going to use whatever the current time is. So I'll use the time function. And I'm going to do two things. I'm going to create a column that's event time. And this will just be whatever the current time is. So this will give you fractional time as well. I go back and forth on whether I like to use that, but if you want to cut that off, use int. And just remember this column needs to be floating point. So, or fractional. So we just need to then cast that back. Or we can cast it to a string. String might have been better in this case, but too late. And we will also make another column. That's our record ID column. And for this, so I want as few collisions as possible. So what I'm going to do for this is then take my data frames index, and I'll just ensure there's no funny business. Set the index. And just to try and, there we go. Show you more of this. And I will then take the index as a string, and I will concatenate that with the event time. As a string. Well, sure, I'll use the as type here. This type string. So in general, if you have an ID, it's better to use that ID, especially if you're going to be getting in new data. I don't have an ID here. My row number will suffice. And in the event time, if you have an event time, great. If you don't, I mean, use your current time. And so let's preview this. And we shouldn't get any errors, and it looks like we didn't. And if we scroll all the way to the right hand side, we now have two columns. We have an event time column, still here, and we have our record ID column, which is just the row concatenated with the event time. So this looks good. We're going to add this. All right. And so now we've done all the processing we needed for that. And we can add a destination that's the feature store. Right? We're going to create a group and click next. And so this JSON schema, you just want to copy this. And actually, it won't let you create this until you copy this, because this is what we're going to pass to that feature group. So we'll create. This brings us to a new tab, the Create Feature Groups tab. I need to call this something else. So example features, you can add a description if you'd like. I'm going to use the offline storage. So this is placed into S3, and we just choose an S3 bucket. Our default works for everything. And then we didn't set up a folder for this, so I will just call this training data. And we'll use that. And then finally, there are a bunch of other options that will just be default for us. And you also need to supply your role. The SageMaker execution role should be enough for this. And then finally, we can continue. And so here we just need to give the feature definitions. So that schema from before that we copied. And we'll go over to JSON because that's how we want to input it. And we'll just paste that in. And it has all the feature definitions. You can type this in manually if you really like, but especially if you have a lot of features, that's not something you want to do. It will do a check to ensure that everything you put in is valid, right? So that all the feature types are valid, your feature names are valid. There's some funny business with ending with underscores and things like that you want to be mindful of. But after we've placed all this, we can continue. And now we need to set our record ID and then our event time. And those are the columns that we created. So our record ID is going to be record ID, and our event time will be event time. Again, these names don't have to be this, but you will have to set them. And we can continue. And you can add some tags if you like. I'm not going to. And then finally, a final check. Just make sure everything's there. So features, you can then go back and check your flow. This works out for us, and so we will create our feature group. So this feature group has been created. We can now export to that feature group, and we're going to jump back into our Data Wrangler flow. It may take a few seconds for this to show up, but we can refresh. And this should be here. Let me go back to our okay, so we have to do some validation. This shouldn't take too long. And if it does, I'll just pause. Okay, that took a few seconds, but I paused the recording. So now we've transformed this. We want to add the destination. That's our feature store. Let me go here and we'll see now Beth example features. And that's what we'll choose. This option always comes up to just validate that the data source you provided matches the schema. And that's always a good thing to do. It gives us a check mark here. That's great. And now we can add this. So now this destination will be our feature store. And I'll show how you can then query the data with Amazon Athena or AWS Athena. So this all looks good. We have three data sources or three destinations. Two of them are S3. One of them, this will also be S3, but it's being cataloged as a feature store. Now, when we're ready to export, we can select create job. And this will give us the option of setting a job name. We can also select which destinations we want to actually export to. which can be useful if you want to rerun one and not the others. We'll run all of these, and then next we'll configure our job. We'll choose the instance type, the instance count. You can choose some more advanced features that won't matter for us here, and then we can create. Should give you a green check mark. You were able to successfully create the job, and it tells you the data job name, and you can click on this to go to that tab. What we'll do is, okay, this is running. We can head back to SageMaker on the console. And this is a processing job. So on the left-hand panel, we can go to processing jobs, and we'll see that we have our Data Wrangler job that we started a few seconds ago running. And it has information that we can check, all the normal logging. So, here's the instance count, here's the instance type. Here we have some output configurations that are available here, just where we're sending stuff. Oops. To testing data, validation data, etc. We also have inputs. So where are we inputting data from, right? So we're inputting that additional data source as well as everything in this folder. And so this is running. It'll take some time, a couple minutes. So I'll pause recording here, and then I'll come back once we're all done. And at that point, I'll just show us, I'll show where our data was placed, which will be in S3. And then I'll show how you can then query your data with Athena. All right, so our processing job has completed. I took it 20 minutes, not too bad. And now I'll first show you where it stored the data, just showing you that it's there. And then we'll head over to Amazon Athena to just sort of query a sample of our data that we've stored in the FeatureStore. So first, let's head to S3. And head to our bucket where we stored everything. And we have our testing data, our training data, and our validation data. I'll go into testing data first. And so now we have our processing job and the output from our processing job, which is a CSV. So that looks good. We'll have something similar in the validation data, so don't really need to check that. And now training data. And so our training data then has an ID there and some domain information. And then we get to our offline store. In this offline store, we have our feature group name. We have the data from that, and then the date we loaded it in. And the series of Parquet files are the data that we've saved there. So this is our training data. And this is cataloged by AWS Glue, so we can query it with Athena. And let's show that really quickly. Let's type in Athena. And we can go here. If you haven't used Athena before, it should have an option here saying before you run your first query, just need to set where you're going to store your results. When you make these queries, results are stored. We just need to sort of set that location. So if you go to settings, we'll manage this, and we just want to have an output. So we can browse S3, and we'll place this here. So I already created this folder, Athena output. You can place it anywhere you'd like though. And we'll choose that. And we can save it. So now when we head back to the editor, right, we're using the AWS data catalog, and we're going to be using FeatureStore, SageMaker FeatureStore as our database. And we have a table that we've been using, which will be the example. A couple of ways you can get this over here. I mean, you can copy it that way or just double click and we'll do select star from this table, limit 100, I suppose. And we can run this. And the query is completed. It took a couple milliseconds. And now we have a sample, or the first 100 rows from our data set. Everything's here, has the record ID here as well. Additionally, it has a write time and an API invocation time. That's recorded and is deleted time as well, Boolean as well. And so there we go. And so now we have processed our data set and we can perform any sort of training and model tuning that we'd like with this. So with that, I will end it there. Again, so this was just showing you some of the import and export options available to you through SageMaker Data Wrangler. I will post relevant links and information in the description fields. Please take a look at that. And if you have questions about this or comments or suggestions on things you like covered, please leave a comment and I'll check on those. I think some of the next step will be using FeatureStore or using some of the other features within Data Wrangler. So with that, I'll thank you and have a good day. Oh, something I did forget or almost forgot is you do want to shut down your Data Wrangler instance when you're finished. And so we'll head back to SageMaker. Well, okay, I'm already there. But you would head back to SageMaker and you just want to go look at your running instances and we can just shut this all down. And these eventually won't show there. But after that, now we're actually done.